December 12, 1942, a frozen, shattered landscape near Barrikady Factory in Stalingrad. The temperature had plunged to nearly minus 30 degrees Celsius, a cruel, relentless knife that carved through flesh and bone, stealing warmth and hope with every passing minute. This was not a war fought merely with bullets and bombs, but with the insidious, pervasive cold that promised a slower, more agonizing death than any enemy rifle. Through this unforgiving, skeletal city where every collapsed building was a tomb and every snowdrift a potential grave, a lone figure moved, clad in a thick, snow-dusted, padded uniform, indistinguishable from the countless others fighting and dying in this apocalyptic crucible. He was nonetheless unique. His movements were deliberate, almost liquid, a silent whisper in a world dominated by the roar of artillery and the crack of small arms fire. He clutched his Mosin-Nagant rifle, its cold metal biting into his gloved hands, yet he felt nothing but the familiar weight of his tool. His journey had begun hours before under the deceptive veil of a moonless night. Skirting crater-pocked streets, navigating through mountains of rubble and shattered concrete, he'd become one with the ruins. Every creak of frozen snow beneath his worn boots was a potential death sentence, every distant flare a momentary exposure. He knew the German patrols, their routes, their habits, their arrogance. He knew their discipline would fray in this hell, but their vigilance, especially near their forward command posts, would remain. His mission was not just to kill, but to instill a paralyzing fear, to dismantle morale one crucial shot at a time. He reached his chosen position just as the first gray fingers of dawn began to paint the eastern sky. It was a skeletal three-story apartment building, its upper floors obliterated, but its ground level offered a surprisingly sheltered alcove. More importantly, it offered an unparalleled, if narrow, vista across a key enemy supply route, and further beyond, a cluster of buildings suspected of housing German high command elements. The building itself was nothing more than concrete ribs and exposed rebar, a testament to the indiscriminate brutality of the fighting. Yet to him, it was a palace, a perfect hunting blind. Carefully, meticulously, he set about preparing his position. First, he used a small entrenching tool to clear away loose debris, creating a flat, stable surface for his prone position. Then, he draped a tattered, snow-white sheet scavenged from a ruined apartment over his shoulders, blending seamlessly with the surrounding snowdrifts and the frost-laden ruins. He made sure his breathing would not give him away, exhaling slowly, watching the faint plume dissipate quickly in the frigid air. His rifle was wiped down one last time, the optics cleared, and then he brought it to bear, scanning the bleak, monochrome landscape through the powerful scope. The wait began. It was a test of endurance, of patience, of absolute mental fortitude. The cold seeped into his bones, a constant gnawing ache that threatened to paralyze his limbs. His fingers, despite the heavy gloves, tingled with the onset of frostbite. His eyes, however, remained sharp, unblinking, meticulously sweeping the landscape. He moved only slightly, incrementally, adjusting his body to counter the worst of the cold, to maintain blood flow, but never compromising his disguise or his line of sight. He felt the hunger pangs, the thirst, the crushing weight of isolation, but he pushed them all down, deep into the recesses of his mind. He wasn't just waiting for a target, he was waiting for the target. Intelligence had been vague yet insistent. A high-ranking officer, possibly a general, was directing operations from this sector, an individual whose removal could send a seismic shockwave through the German lines, destabilizing their command structure and sowing panic where there had been order. This was not about individual kills, it was about psychological warfare, a precision strike designed to terrorize the very architects of the enemy's strategy. 3 days, if necessary, he would wait. 3 days of frozen vigil in the heart of hell for one fleeting moment, one perfect shot. January 14th, 1943, on the frozen outskirts of Stalingrad, The bitter wind howled a prelude to 3 days of an agonizing vigil. Senior Sergeant Vasily Zaitsev, a ghost barely discernible against the snow-covered ruins, melted deeper into his chosen hide. His rifle, an extension of his will, lay patiently across the snow, its metal a chilling conduit for the cold. The mission was clear, terrifyingly precise, and demanded a patience bordering on the superhuman to eliminate the architect of the enemy's local operations, a man whose presence ensured order and strategic direction, a man whose absence would unleash chaos. The first day was a grueling test of sensory deprivation and heightened awareness. The cold was a constant gnawing presence, seeking purchase in every unprotected inch of skin, trying to numb his resolve. He allowed himself only minimal movement, the slightest shift in position, a betrayal of his existence. Hours blurred into an endless study of the enemy's routines, the comings and goings, the guard changes, the specific points of vulnerability in their seemingly impregnable compound. He memorized patterns of movement, anticipating the trajectory of every sentry, the timing of every patrol. Yet, the high-value target remained elusive, hidden deep within the protected structures. The Germans, by now acutely aware of a sniper operating in the sector, responded with an almost palpable tension. Every shadow became a threat, every distant sound a potential harbinger of doom. Their caution was a victory in itself, a testament to the psychological warfare Zaitsev was already waging. As the sun, a pale, indifferent disk, arced across the frigid sky for the second time, the conditions worsened. A fresh snowfall began, thick and relentless, further obscuring the already limited visibility. While it offered additional camouflage, it also heightened the challenge. His hunger gnawed, a dull, persistent ache in his stomach. Thirst became a parching torment, his throat dry and raw. His muscles, locked in rigid stillness, screamed in protest. Every fiber of his being urged movement, warmth, relief, but his mind, honed by years of brutal combat, remained utterly disciplined. The Germans, increasingly frustrated and paranoid, intensified their countermeasures. Random bursts of machine gun fire raked the ruins. Artillery shells landed sporadically, their concussive blasts rattling the earth and sing shards of ice flying. They hoped to flush him out, to provoke a reaction, to break his nerve. Zaitsev remained silent, a frozen statue of grim determination, his breath barely stirring the powdered snow around his face. He understood that the longer he waited, the more terror he inflicted, a silent, unseen specter haunting their every move. The third day dawned, a bleak gray canvas over the shattered landscape. Zaitsev was at the absolute limit of human endurance. Exhaustion had settled deep into his bones, a heavy cloak threatening to drag him into unconsciousness. His senses, however, remained acutely sharp, refined by deprivation and the sheer will to survive. He was a creature of pure focus, every heartbeat a rhythm of anticipation. The German High Command, now almost certainly in a state of heightened alert, displayed palpable signs of fraying nerves. Their movements were jerky, uncertain, their conversations more hushed, their eyes constantly scanning the desolate surroundings. The command structure felt the pressure, a silent, invisible hand choking their ability to operate with confidence. They knew a precision hunter was out there, patient, invisible, deadly. They just didn't know who or where or when he would strike. Zaitsev, in his icy tomb, was poised, his finger hovering near the trigger, waiting for that single, perfect, fleeting opportunity, the culmination of 3 days of unimaginable stillness and strategic terror. This agonizing wait wasn't merely a demonstration of marksmanship, but a profound masterclass in psychological warfare and human endurance. The legacy of those 3 days wasn't just about the potential for a single, pivotal kill, but about the pervasive terror instilled by an unseen, unyielding force. It taught that the threat of a bullet, held for 72 torturous hours, could unravel an enemy's command structure more effectively than an entire barrage. It was a testament to the strategic power of patience, of becoming an indistinguishable part of the environment, a silent, deadly promise in the heart of winter's embrace. The ultimate cost of such a vigil, however, was borne not just by the enemy, but by the soul of the one who erred it, forever shaped by the cold, silent crucible of the wait. The moment the shot finally rang out, shattering the silence of the frozen landscape, it was more than just a bullet finding its mark. It was the culmination of an agonizing test of will, a surgical strike that sent a chilling ripple through the enemy lines. When the German officer, likely a seasoned veteran whose presence alone projected authority, crumpled unexpectedly into the snow, it wasn't merely the loss of one man. It was the decapitation of a vital nerve center, a sudden, inexplicable void in the chain of command that moments before had seemed invincible. Panic, often subtle but profound, would then begin to spread. The immediate aftermath would involve frantic calls for medics, desperate searches for the unseen attacker, and a chilling realization among the survivors they were being watched. This wasn't the random, brutal lottery of artillery fire or the chaotic exchange of machine gun bursts. This was personal. This was deliberate. A silent hunter, camouflaged into the bleak canvas of winter, had chosen a specific target, studied its movements, and executed a precise, deadly judgment. Such incidents were not isolated anomalies. They were a calculated, terrifying component of Soviet defensive and offensive strategy. From the frozen steppes of Stalingrad to the snow-laden forests of the Eastern Front, Soviet snipers became an unseen, pervasive threat to the Wehrmacht's officer corps. Their mission was clear: to demoralize the enemy by systematically eliminating its leaders, from company commanders giving orders on the front line to battalion and regimental officers coordinating movements from slightly behind the immediate fray. The psychological impact far outweighed the numerical loss of personnel. German officers, once confident in their relative safety behind the immediate skirmish lines, found themselves increasingly vulnerable. No dugout felt entirely secure, no observation post completely safe. The constant, gnawing fear of a sudden, precise strike began to erode their composure. They started to adopt exaggerated caution, moving less openly, wearing less distinguishing attire, and even sometimes resorting to having body doubles or moving in unpredictable patterns. This hypervigilance, while understandable, had severe operational consequences. Decision-making slowed. Orders were delivered with increased hesitation or through less visible, more time-consuming means. The fluidity of command, so crucial in the fast-paced, brutal reality of the Eastern Front, began to falter. A general's unexpected death by a sniper's bullet or a colonel's sudden collapse mid-command could plunge an entire sector into disarray. Subordinates, deprived of clear leadership, often hesitated, leading to missed opportunities, delayed counterattacks, or even retreats under pressure. The unseen threat created a psychological fog of war, where the enemy wasn't just in front of you, but potentially anywhere, everywhere, a patient ghost with a rifle. The Germans, for their part, recognized the gravity of the threat. They deployed their own snipers, increased patrols specifically tasked with hunting Soviet marksmen, and implemented stricter security protocols around command posts. Yet, countering an enemy that moved like a shadow, often operating alone or in small, highly trained pairs, proved incredibly difficult. The Soviet sniper, often a master of camouflage and fieldcraft honed in grueling training, possessed an almost supernatural ability to disappear into the landscape, waiting days if necessary for that single, high-value shot. This relentless targeting of officers also had a profound effect on the morale of the ordinary German soldier. Witnessing a respected leader suddenly fall, not from a massed assault, but from an invisible source, sowed seeds of doubt and fear. It amplified the sense of dread that permeated the Eastern Front, reinforcing the idea that no one was truly safe, and that even the highest echelons of command could be plucked away without warning. The psychological strain was immense, contributing to the broader breakdown of fighting spirit in sectors particularly affected by sniper activity. The legacy of the Soviet sniper, epitomized by the silent three-day vigil, transcends mere marksmanship. It stands as a stark testament to the asymmetric power of precision, a chilling reminder that a single well-placed bullet delivered by an unwavering hand could dismantle morale, disrupt command, and sow terror more effectively than thousands of rounds of conventional fire. These were not just soldiers, they were psychological weapons, their patient resolve etched into the frozen ground, their unseen presence a constant, terrifying question mark over the very stability of the German war machine. The cost was immense, not only in the lives taken, but in the unseen psychological wounds inflicted on those who waited and those who were hunted. The silent promise of a bullet lurking in the vastness of the snow became a permanent, haunting chapter in the brutal history of the Eastern Front, forever reshaping the conduct of warfare and reminding future generations of the profound, unseen power wielded by a single determined individual in the crucible of conflict. February 17, 1943, deep within a frosted bunker on the Eastern Front, the air hung heavy not just with cigarette smoke, but with an intangible dread. Reports from the forward positions were increasingly laced with a new kind of anxiety. It wasn't merely the brutal cold or the unrelenting Soviet offensive that gnawed at the German high command. It was the chilling, unseen presence of a new enemy tactic. A silent terror had begun to permeate the ranks, a whisper of dread that eroded morale more effectively than any conventional assault. The strategic brilliance of a Soviet sniper, or indeed the collective specter of them, lay not just in their kill count, but in their ability to weaponize fear itself. The death of a single officer, a vital MCO, or a seasoned communications specialist was not an isolated incident. Each precise, sudden became a chilling signal, an undeniable proof that no one was truly safe, that even the most seemingly secure positions offered no sanctuary. This realization, spreading like a virus through the German lines, began to infect the very command structure. Officers, once accustomed to observing the battlefield from exposed vantage points or conducting vital reconnaissance with a degree of calculated risk, now hesitated. The familiar act of moving between command posts, of visiting frontline units to boost morale, or even of merely stepping outside a fortified structure, became fraught with paralyzing risk. The sniper's unseen rifle didn't just target bodies, it targeted confidence, initiative, and the fundamental ability to lead effectively. This erosion of command initiative soon manifested as what military strategists would later term command paralysis. Decisions that once flowed swiftly and decisively began to falter, bogged down by excessive caution and a desperate need for absolute, often unattainable, security. Orders were delayed, patrols hesitated, and critical movements were either postponed indefinitely or executed with an almost crippling apprehension. The very machinery of the German war effort, renowned for its efficiency and speed, found grit in its gears, a phantom saboteur in its systems. The psychological impact extended beyond just the immediate threat. Paranoia became rampant. Every distant glint of light, every rustle in the snow, every unexplained shadow was scrutinized with an intense, often exhausting vigilance. The mind, constantly anticipating the flash and crack of a distant shot, found itself perpetually under siege. This perpetual state of high alert, the constant drain of anticipating the invisible, wore down even the most seasoned soldiers and officers, leading to fatigue, irritability, and a profound sense of helplessness against an enemy that seemed to possess omnipresence. High-ranking officers, previously immune to such direct personal threats in the rear echelons, now faced an uncomfortable truth. Their insignia, their clearer chain of command, their very authority, made them prime targets. They were no longer just strategists. They were potential victims. This shift in personal vulnerability forced a reevaluation of every procedure, every movement, and every decision, injecting a debilitating self-preservation into the core of their operational planning. Resources that could have been used for offensive action were diverted to elaborate security details, counter-sniper operations, and ever more fortified command bunkers, all in a desperate attempt to regain a semblance of control over an invisible threat. The legacy of the psychological warfare on the Eastern Front was profound. It underscored that battle was not solely a clash of materiel and manpower, but a relentless assault on the human spirit, on morale, and on the very will to fight. The sniper, once perceived as merely a specialized marksman, emerged as a potent instrument of strategic disruption, capable of undermining an entire command structure with nothing more than patience, skill, and the terror of the unknown. Future military doctrines would forever bear the scars of this realization, incorporating rigorous counter-sniper training and emphasizing the psychological resilience required to operate under such relentless, unseen pressure. The chilling truth remains that sometimes the greatest terror comes not from the thunder of overwhelming force, but from the silent, unseen promise of a single precise lurking in the vastness, waiting to unravel the fabric of command and sow eternal whispers of dread. November 15th, 1943, in a dimly lit, damp bunker serving as a German forward command post near Kirovograd. The air was thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke and an unspoken tension, heavier than the rumble of distant artillery. The whispers of dread that had begun as isolated incidents now coalesced into a pervasive, chilling reality. It wasn't merely the fear of death which was a constant companion on the Eastern Front, but the insidious, corrosive fear of how death might arrive, silent, unseen, and utterly arbitrary. This particular dread burrowed deep into the psyche of the German High Command, twisting their established doctrines and ultimately crippling their will. The legendary audacity that had defined the Wehrmacht's early campaigns began to crumble under this invisible threat. Commanders, once celebrated for their personal courage and willingness to lead from the front, found themselves increasingly reluctant to expose themselves. A general's inspection of forward lines, once a morale booster, became a calculated risk, a gamble with an unknown sniper. This paralysis wasn't confined to a single individual. It spread like a contagion through the ranks of the command staff. Decisions became cautious, delayed, or delegated to junior officers whose inexperience often led to costly mistakes. The chain of command, once so robust, now frayed under the constant psychological strain. The sniper's bullet was not just a projectile. It was a psychological weapon of immense power. Each confirmed kill, each rumor of a high-ranking officer targeted, amplified the existing paranoia. Maps were studied from deeper recesses of command posts. Briefings were held in bunkers further from the front. The once clear, direct lines of sight and communication that were vital for dynamic warfare became compromised by the self-imposed blinders of fear. Officers trained for decades in rigid military discipline found their nerves fraying, their concentration shattered by the knowledge that a single, distant eye might be tracking their every move. The meticulous planning that characterized German operations began to suffer. Reconnaissance patrols, essential for understanding the enemy, became hesitant, their movements constrained not just by Soviet patrols but by the lurking phantom. This systematic erosion of confidence had profound operational consequences. Critical decisions, which in the lightning-fast warfare of the Eastern Front required immediate and decisive action, were now bogged down by an excess of caution, by the internal debate between duty and self-preservation. Commanders hesitated to visit the front lines to assess situations firsthand, relying instead on filtered reports from subordinates who were themselves under the same psychological siege. This created a dangerous disconnect between the reality of the battlefield and the strategic thinking at higher echelons. The aggressive initiative that was a hallmark of German tactics withered, replaced by a defensive posture, not just against direct frontal assault, but against the insidious, omnipresent threat of the unseen shooter. The impact went beyond individual fear. It warped the very culture of command. Trust, a cornerstone of military effectiveness, began to erode. Who could be trusted to go forward? Who was truly brave or merely reckless? The camaraderie of the fighting force, though never completely broken, was strained by the knowledge that any exposed silhouette, any moment of perceived vulnerability could be their last. The swagger of early victories, the unshakable belief in their own tactical superiority, was steadily replaced by a creeping sense of vulnerability, a grudging acknowledgement of the Soviets' brutal effectiveness. The sniper, often operating alone, became a potent symbol of Soviet resilience and the German High Command's growing impotence against the less conventional, more insidious form of warfare. The legacy of the psychological warfare extends far beyond the blood-soaked battlefields of the Eastern Front. It laid bare the profound truth that military power is not solely a matter of tanks and artillery, but equally a fragile construct of morale, will, and the human spirit's capacity for endurance or collapse. The shattered confidence within the German High Command, born from the chilling effectiveness of the Soviet sniper, became a powerful, albeit silent, contributor to their eventual defeat. It demonstrated how a seemingly minor threat, when wielded with precision and psychological acuity, could disproportionately dismantle the operational effectiveness of even the most formidable military machine. The echoes of that silent terror persist. Modern military doctrines now meticulously integrate counter-sniper protocols, not just as tactical necessities, but as vital components of psychological resilience training. The lessons learned in those brutal winters resonated through the decades, emphasizing the importance of securing the psychological terrain of command as fiercely as any physical objective. The unseen enemy, the lurking threat, remains a potent force in the annals of warfare, a stark reminder that sometimes the most devastating blows are struck, not against the body but against the will, leaving an indelible scar on the collective psyche of command. The indelible scar left on the collective psyche of command wasn't merely a wound from individual casualties, but a deep systemic trauma that reshaped the very foundations of military thinking. This terror, born of the unseen threat, forced a fundamental reevaluation of how armies trained, equipped, and protected their personnel, especially their leaders. What began as a desperate adaptation on the frozen battlefields of the Eastern Front, a response to an enemy who could materialize and vanish like a ghost, evolved into sophisticated counter-sniper doctrines and specialized psychological resilience training. The lessons learned in those brutal winters resonated through the decades, emphasizing the importance of securing the psychological terrain of command as fiercely as any physical objective. The unseen enemy, the lurking threat, remains a potent force in the annals of warfare, a stark reminder that sometimes the most devastating blows are struck not against the body, but against the will. The figure of the lone sniper, whether the patient Soviet waiting in the snow or the almost mythical White Death of Finland, transcend mere combat statistics. They became an archetype of terror, a personification of the unpredictable and the unstoppable. Their legacy isn't just measured in the number of targets engaged, but in the pervasive sense of dread they instilled. This was a psychological weapon of immense power, turning vast, sprawling battlefields into intimate, deadly duels where every shadow could conceal a killer, every sound a prelude to doom. Commanders, forced to navigate this invisible labyrinth of fear, found their decision-making processes hampered, their movements constrained, and their confidence eroded. The sniper's true triumph was not always the kill shot, but the paralyzing grip of anticipation that seized an entire unit. This profound psychological impact, often overlooked in the grand narratives of tank battles and air campaigns, highlights the enduring fragility of human courage under sustained, personal threat. It underscores the unique burden of the sniper, a warrior operating in profound isolation, often for days, confronting their own demons of patience, resolve, and moral complexity. Simultaneously, it reveals the intense pressure on those hunted, who must contend with an enemy who is both everywhere and nowhere. The silent contest between hunter and hunted became a microcosm of the larger war, a stark, concentrated struggle of wills where skill, discipline, and nerve determine survival. Even in an era dominated by advanced technology, precision weaponry, and drone warfare, the fundamental principles demonstrated by a sniper waiting 3 days in the snow retain their potency. The human element, the art of concealment, the mastery of terrain, and the psychological dominance of the unseen threat continue to define the role of the sniper. The echoes of that Soviet sniper's patience, the terror he invoked in the German high command, still reverberate through modern military academies and tactical manuals. His story, though perhaps less celebrated than those of generals or grand campaigns, offers a chilling testament to the disproportionate power of a single highly skilled individual to profoundly alter the course of battle, not just physically, but deep within the minds of those who lead. The enduring legacy of the lone sniper is a stark reminder that war, at its heart, remains a deeply human aver, a crucible of fear, courage, and ingenuity. It teaches us that even in the most expansive and mechanized conflicts, the quietest actions can cast the longest shadows, leaving an indelible mark not only on the battlefield, but on the very psychology of warfare itself. The silence, the waiting, the precision, and the pervasive fear forged in those frozen landscapes serve as a poignant, eternal testament to the human spirit's capacity for both inflicting and enduring terror.